So you're thinking about moving to Chicago, Illinois. Well, let me ask you, have you ever driven over a pothole so deep your windshield cracked? Or did you develop trust issues when the hot water in your shower ran out and turned to pure ice? Because that's what Chicago's winters are like. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat a damn thing. I'm not born and raised in Chicago, so I have an outsider's perspective on what it's really like to live here. And if you're thinking about moving to Chicago, then you're going to want to know everything from the good, the bad, the ugly, the pros, the cons, and everything in between. And well, I'm going to give it to you. So relax, grab a slice as we get into it. Hey, what's good everybody? This is Andy Svalesen, your favorite realtor for the Chicagoland area. Now, if this is your first time to our channel and you want to learn everything about what it's like to work, eat, sleep, play, live, and the pros and cons of Chicago, then hit that subscribe button, guys, and ring the little bell so you're notified every single time I make a new video. I'm super grateful for everyone reaching out and letting me help you find that perfect place to call home. So for everyone else out there, if you're thinking about moving to Chicago or the outside suburbs, shoot me a text, give me a call, send me an email, days, nights, weekends, it doesn't matter. I got your back when you move to Chicago, and if you do all three, you know it, drinks and pizzas on me. I'm doubling down. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit differently than what you'd see on other YouTube channels. Instead of doing a 5 pros and a 5 cons, I'm actually going to be talking about 5 things that I think make Chicago unique. And I'm going to be weighing on both sides of that like a true pros and cons list. Now, the very last one that I have is going to be super surprising, so if you're thinking about moving to Chicago, definitely stick around for that. So starting with number one of my favorites is things to do. Seriously, we have so many things to do. I know it's really generic to say that, but there are a lot of things that keep you busy or happy here while you're in Chicago. I know that when I discovered this, I was actually searching online for things to do over the weekend, and I became completely overwhelmed by the amount of choices that I had. The biggest pro to this is that it leaves you with a seemingly endless amount of things to enrich your life. Oh, did I mention that all these are free? It's seriously incredible. Just going down the list of the city's own festivals, you'll find like 20 of them happening each month. Things like the Air and Water Show, which is only in Chicago and one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Driving down Lakeshore Drive with jets flying overhead, it was such a crazy experience. Or the Grant Park Music Festival, which is a free music festival that happens every year in Chicago throughout the whole summer. I had so many great lazy days sitting with friends with a book, just chilling and listening to true Chicagoan music. That's not even including the everyday stuff like the CSO at the park, or the free museum days, or pop-up events. Some of my favorite things to do are really simple, but I guess I'm just a simple man. And after a busy day, I'll walk on over to a nearby beach, bring out a book, and enjoy the beautiful day. I think I have a problem with books. And sometimes I like to schedule things that I haven't done before. Like last summer, I rented a canoe and went all the way down the river, down to Chinatown. It was such a good time to see the city in a different perspective, and you gotta love that boba tea. There's also neighborhood-specific events like the shopping bazaar at Andersonville or the art fair in Old Town. These things happen every single week. There's also a huge amount of green areas with bike trails, fishing, meetup groups, social clubs, architecture walking tours. You could even take the train to a totally different city. Are you starting to feel overwhelmed yet? Because I am. And that brings us to the other side of this topic. It gets really crowded here. And the downside to this is that it can be a lot to take in sometimes. There's just so much that goes on beyond the hustle and bustle of city living that sometimes it's just really easy to get burnt out. It also doesn't help that because of these events, people from all over the world visit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you live in a high traffic area, it can be bothersome to be around the environment for a long period of time. Being at a crowded beach can really suck if you don't set your expectations right, or sitting in line in the dead of winter for Chris Kindle Mart. Oh man, there's nothing worse than. And these things will happen, it just comes with the territory. But let me touch back on the part of being burnt out. There is a real city energy here, and being a part of that can really affect your stress levels. And what's worse, it's sometimes really hard to find a quiet place to unwind. Whether or not you can handle that depends on on you. So if you're thinking about which areas you need to consider based on your personality, you can either reach out to me or check out the video up above. That'll get you started. Alright, so number 2 on my list is public transportation. Oh man. You guys know I'm a little obsessed with trains in Chicago, and out of all the major cities I've lived in, Chicago definitely takes the cake for having the best. It can take you pretty much anywhere you want to go and brings you to not 1, but 2 airports, and for everything else in between, you could just take the bus. What I love about taking the train in the city is that for me, it really keeps things connected. When I'm driving a car, I'm paying attention to the road, avoiding pool-sized potholes, and playing with my hair. There are just so many things that I'm responsible for going on while I'm doing this that it really takes me out of the flow of my day. I get that for some people that's a good thing. Maybe they like to be in their car, and you're welcome to beat me up in the comments if that's not your jam. But for me, there's some sort of twisted joy of going to a train with a book and some headphones and silently judging people in traffic as you pass them by. On the flip side, the train does have its own problems. Sometimes it gets so crowded that it's often the better move to wait for the next train, a necessary and sometimes bitter pill to swallow. It can often run at irregular hours and the most inconvenient time, and there has been an increase in grime and generally unsavory types aboard the train, like smokers and Cubs fans. One tip for trains is that if you're feeling uncomfortable, head on over to the first car where the conductor's at. Oh man, if there's one thing in this entire planet that I'm afraid of, it's train conductors and angry bus drivers. Overall, the CTA is a service whose value far surpasses the cons for almost 70% of Chicagoans. It does have its problems, but come on guys, let's give them a break. Alrighty folks, now on to our next category, food and entertainment. And I have to say, I have been nothing but impressed by the huge variety and levels of quality of food in Chicago. Since I've lived here, I've had the opportunity to try all new different types of food I've never even had before. Some things I'm really glad of trying, like the burger at Au Cheval, and some things, well, I had it. Right before the pandemic, Chicago was named the best food city in the entire world by Time Out. And I have to say guys, I totally agree. Unlike so many other major cities with great food options, Chicago's cuisine isn't walled off by expensive costs. Sure, I mean you could if you wanted to pay $1,200 per person for one of those fancy meals, but for me, when I get the craving, I will move entire planets just to get a taste of those $5 tacos at Maria Zaragoza. Now regarding entertainment, Chicago is definitely a sports city, especially with 8 major teams across several historic stadiums. And you'll be hard pressed to find a time where sports really isn't a thing. And believe it or not, Chicago is actually world known for its huge theater scene, where you can catch mind-blowing shows in dozens of theaters, both big and small. Adding on to the performing arts, we're also really famous for our comedy scene in Chicago. Places like the Second City, IO Theater, The Annoyance, these places have become the home and the birthplace for many comedians like Hannibal Buress, the late Robin Williams, Bill Murray. With so many quality options comes, of course, with high demand, which brings us to the other side of this argument, the cost of living. Entertainment and food can really start to add up. For a lot of the restaurants that I like to go to, it isn't uncommon for me to spend $14 to $18 on a cocktail or even $30 for an entree, and that's just for me. Tickets for gamer shows can really have a huge range, but expect to pay at least $50 for a good time, more if it's a special event like Hamilton or the World Series. Sure, when you normally look up cost of living in a city, you usually come up with the staples and bare essentials like housing costs and bills. And except for one category, Chicago is actually matching or below the national average in cost of living. But for me, food and entertainment is really one of those costs that you need to be aware of, because in order to really enjoy the city and all it has to offer, you gotta be aware of the money that you're spending. Alright, so let's talk about our next topic, the famous Chicago weather. Okay, so I know you've heard all sorts of things about the weather in Chicago, especially the winter. But I'm telling you guys, the summers, the warm months of the year, doesn't get enough praise. During the summer, Chicago truly comes alive with an endless amount of things to do. The amount of activities that happens when it gets warmer, like it occurs from like a flip of a switch. It's like as soon as it goes from 2 pairs of pants weather to 1 pair of pants weather, everyone seemingly makes it their ultimate life mission to make every single day count. It's totally bananas, but in the very best way possible. Everyone out here is just so happy to be out. Now, temperature wise, it does reach the mid 90s, which for me isn't really that bad, especially coming from Texas. One of my favorite things to do when it's warmer outside is actually leaving the city and taking a long camping trip to kind of unwind a bit, you know? Or sometimes I'll drive through to the surrounding states to check out what they have to offer. Lake Michigan is absolutely beautiful this time of year, and it seriously looks like an ocean with how big that thing is. Navy Pier really pops up with all the things you might expect in a tourist hotspot, along with the twice weekly summer fireworks. It's also the perfect time for patio weather to check out all those amazing happy hour specials. Speaking of specials, if you're interested in finding the best spots for happy hours and brunches, I made an interactive map that you'll find down in the description below. Sooner or later, you'll find out why people always talk about winter in Chicago, which brings us to the other side of our topic. It gets a little cold. Winters here are brutal. During my first year, we had something called a polar vortex, which brought temperatures to -50 Fahrenheit. I've never heard of anything like that. But the reality is, dealing with the weather just takes great preparation and a good jacket at the very bare minimum. The city does its part too. I've never seen a city crew move so fast when it snows in anywhere else in the entire planet than the city of Chicago. These guys are so incredibly fast, the next morning, the streets are clean. We also have something called the Pedway that runs through downtown. It's like an underground city that connects to several train stations, buildings, and hotspots, so that during the coldest winter months, you could stay warm and dry. Don't get me wrong, I actually love cold weather, but there's this point, way too long after the holidays, when the skies are always so gray, and the sun goes down at 4 p.m., and you're standing crossing the street, shin deep in dirty, gray, wet slush, doing your best to hold on to that sliver of whatever holiday spirit you have left, when suddenly you get hit with that surprise gust of polar wind and you just start rethinking your entire life. Alright, so on to our next topic. One thing that I think is most compelling about moving to Chicago. Chicago is a true melting pot of the world. Being such a massive cultural hub brings a special spice to an already great city. One thing that people always notice about Chicago is just how well designed the city is. I mean, the deep history and the amazing architecture that follows it leaves a mark throughout the city in a variety of ways. I don't think I'll ever get sick of this view, or this view, or this view, or Frank Lloyd Wright. It's actually pretty easy to find something to be impressed by when you're talking about Chicago's architecture. But the true beauty in the city happens down at the ground level, with the people walking the streets each and every single day. What's a day exploring historical landmarks without visiting the local favorite, the Tamale Guy? Or a leisurely summertime bike ride down Lakeshore Drive without visiting Valois? Or a regrettable night without Malort. There is a deep pride that Chicagoans have for their culture that you'll see on every corner, cuisine, and parade. This pride becomes electric and so tangible you can actually feel the excitement in your bones. This is a place where people can feel connected and free while marching to the beat of their own drum. On the other side of diversity is adversity, and that brings us to the last part of our final topic, crime. Now let me first say that the crime in Chicago is largely overblown in the media. As far as rankings of the most dangerous cities in America, Chicago is currently 28. Not to say there isn't problems with the city, because there definitely is. And while I don't walk down the street at night fearing for my life, I do know better than to do so drunk and unaware of my surroundings. Crime has risen to higher levels since the pandemic started, and while it has become even more important to stay vigilant, it's important to note that most of the dangerous areas in Chicago are actually contained to just a few neighborhoods. The root of crime is largely unknown, but it doesn't help that Chicago has its own long rap sheet of segregation, corruption, and police brutality. People often assume that Chicago is called the Windy City because of the actual wind, but in actuality, we're called that because of all the windbag politicians that have plagued this city. In fact, over half of the governors we've had have been guilty of corruption of some kind, so it's no wonder why crime doesn't improve, because it turns out the leadership that we elect are just as guilty as the criminals on the street. Crime is indeed a poison for Chicago, affecting the prestige that it has and blending its value to the outside world. In spite of this struggle, Chicagoans carry on, hopeful for better days when things might change. But for others, that change has already happened. For the uninformed, Chicago might be a frigid winter wasteland, rife with gang violence and bad pizza. The reality is that Chicago is just undervalued by public opinion. When you think about the lower cost of living, the amenities that it provides, and the opportunities granted, you can begin to see what the locals have been saying for decades. Chicago truly punches above its weight. In some areas, the news is spreading, with neighborhoods like Bridgeport increasing in value by almost 300% since 2020. So what does that mean for you? Well, if you're planning on making a move involving real estate, the market is getting incredibly competitive right now. We've already helped so many people this year buy or sell their home. I mean, we've got this process dialed in. The struggle that most people have when it comes to real estate transactions comes from one thing: planning. So if you're thinking about selling your home for the highest amount possible, or buying while the interest rates are still low, reach out to me and let's make it happen. Until next time, folks, I'll catch you later.